Greetings, beautiful soul, and welcome to my channel, The Optimist Hub. My name is Yanga, and today's video, let's talk a bit about the growing pains of transforming or changing. Now, before we get into that, I must apologize for my absence. I know that I haven't posted a video in the past 7 weeks, I believe. I was distracted, but I'm back. I'm locked in. And the focus is still the Optimist Hub, and so we're back at it again. But let's get into it. The growing pains of transforming. Now, transformation is something that is constant. Change is something that is constant. Look, it's often said that change with change before change changes you, because regardless of whether you allow the change to take place, change will force you to evolve. That is because everything is seasonal, and change itself is seasonal. It is cyclical. It's like a parabola. The journey of life is not linear, right? It's got its waves, it's got its peaks and its troughs, right? There are moments where we are, supercharged, everything is all good, we're experiencing the peak and all of that, and there are moments where we experience the downfall and the pits of the pits, and we again, it's a cycle. And I think that is something that's very important to note, is when you embark on the journey of change, it is not going to be smooth or linear, right? Be aware of the fact that it is cyclical, and that it is in the cycles that you need to still be very intentional with choosing, the best version of yourself that you're changing to become, right? Choose this potential that lives within you, that is waiting for you to meet it halfway. Choose that version of yourself, right? Yes, in the moment. And I think, look, we tend to fixate a lot on the end product, and we forget about the process. The process is essential. The process is important. In fact, it is through the process of change, the process of transforming, that we experience the uncomfortable shifts and experience things we've never experienced before. That is the process. Let us detach from the end result and let us fully immerse ourselves in the process. And yes, that's where the growing pains are the most prominent, in the process. The process is not, like I said, linear. The process is cyclical, but also the process is not, it doesn't have to be that hard also. It doesn't have to be ugly, right? It doesn't have to be, but it's also not the best, right? The process requires you to be one very much vulnerable with self. Sit with self, be vulnerable with self. What is it that you are working towards? What is it that you want to change for and to, right? What is the intention behind that? And what are you willing to do? What is it that you're willing to gain and that you're willing to lose in the process of change, right? Because oftentimes, like I'm saying, we tend to fixate on the final product, forgetting that there is a process, right? I am almost imagining a seed being buried in the ground. At first, it seems very bleak. It looks very dark. It looks like there's no direction. What is happening? And in most cases, really, when we embark on a journey of change or transformation, at first we don't really know what's waiting for us on the other side. We actually don't even know what we're doing. We are, quote unquote, buried in the ground, right? But it's beautiful when I think of it, how a seed is able to surrender to the process of becoming, how it just trusts the process, and in the darkness that it's in, it is able to surrender to the ground, right? And of course, there's outside work, which you also need to do, which is so the outside work would be the watering of the seed and whatnot. So the watering is you taking inspired action towards the change, towards the process, in the process. It is you being intentional. This inspired action is intention. Again, those three things that I mentioned, that is you watering the seed. And so when that is being done, the seed is also you are also able to surrender to the process. Once you are able to identify your why. Why are you doing this? Why do you want the change? Who is the change for? What will happen when the change has, do you know what I mean? That is you watering the seed. You're working, actively working towards uncovering, unearthing, this version of self. And again, the seed surrendering to its process. I'm almost imagining how uncomfortable it must be for a root to sprout out of the seed. Because the root must sprout out. For the seed to be anchored, for the process to continue, it must sprout out. And so again, that is the growing pain. There's something inside of you that is bubbling inside of you, that is living inside of you, that is waiting to be expressed outside of you. Imagine this to be the root. It needs to be anchored. But for it to take place, you need to take inspired action. You need to surrender to the process of becoming. And you need to surrender also to the process of unbecoming. Unbecoming the version of self that is self-limiting, the version of self that is that has self-doubt, the version of self that does that self-sabotages, the version of self that really stands in. You need to unlearn all of that so that you can become, so that you can transform into a better version of self, right? And so once the roots are anchored into the ground, this is the process of the seed trusting the process. This is the moment in which the seed is trusting the process. Then everything works out as it should. Because then the seed not only now sheds off the shell that it was in, because imagine it this way, right? When a seed sprouts out of the ground to meet the sun and the other elements of nature, being the air and oxygen and all of that, it doesn't sprout out in its original form. Yeah, you won't see a seed sprout out of the ground the way it was when it was planted. That is the process of transformation. You need to unravel yourself. You need to de-shell yourself. You need to unclothe yourself. You need to be vulnerable. You need to trust the process and be in the process, right? In order to become, in order to transform, in order for you to not become the same version that you were when you started, you need to let the process happen. Yes. It's going to be uncomfortable. Like I said, I cannot imagine how painful it must be for the seed to feel from the inside of its gut, for lack of a better term, this root that is literally poking, protruding out of its shell, out of its vessel actually. And in the many, roots that are now also just sprouting out, then it breaks the shell. Then the root itself peeks out through the ground, where it is now ready to meet the other elements. The sun, the air, the oxygen, everything, right? This is to say, transformation is seasonal again. That process needed to happen. The seed needed to sit in its moment of darkness. The seed needed to trust the process. It needed to let go. It needed to go through the growing pains in order for it to sprout out. And even then, it still goes through a process, and it's now met with other unfamiliar, uncertain conditions, right? Because it trusted the process, but how does it know that it's going to do well with now the sun? How does it know that it's going to do well with experiencing the winds and the rain? But it doesn't. But it still goes with the flow. It still trusts the process. And so with that said, beautiful soul, with that analogy, this is to say, yes, the journey will not be smooth all the time. The journey will not be clear all the time. Do whatever it is that you need to do in order to get to where you want to get to. But first, look at what you have. Look at what you have around you. Do what you can with what you have. Use what you can with what you have. And fully immerse yourself in the process of becoming. And the process of becoming really just requires you just one thing. You need to unbecome. You need to unbecome the old version of self that is hindering you from becoming. You need to de-shell yourself. You need to unravel yourself. How do you do that? How do you unravel yourself? How do you let go of these toxic behaviors that are holding you back, these self-limiting beliefs, whatever it is that is holding you back? How do you do that? Like I said before in the beginning, sit with self. Sit with self. Be honest with self. Be vulnerable with self. If there are any wounds that need to be healed, look at that. Pay attention to that. Because oftentimes we walk around with scars. There was a wound, but it's a scar. And oftentimes we tend to dwell on the scar and we tend to revisit. For example, I have a scar on my arm. Every time I look at it, I mean, of course I remember how I got it, but I don't remind myself of the pain. Look, I know this is a metaphorical example, and it's not easy to really apply what I'm saying. It takes time, but you need to be intentional with the things that you really want to work on, right? So for example, I have a scar on my arm. It was a wound before, gaping wound, bleeding, just horrible. Flesh was exposed, just not the best time, right? It healed over time, of course, because I paid attention to it. I was intentional with dressing it, with taking care of it, etc. And over time, it healed. It's healed. What was once a wound is healed. It's just a scar. I think oftentimes we tend to look at the scars and think we haven't healed. But the thing is, you've healed. The scar is there. And the scar really is a marking of what has happened. The thing is, we are museums of all the occurrences that have happened in our lives. Everything under the sun that you have experienced, you are a museum of. And so yes, my body forever will have the scar, but it's no longer a wound. If you're catching my drift, right? If it is time for you to let go of a wound or that has once healed, I mean, it's there, but don't always dwell on the pain that it was before. Again, this all happens over time. This is what transformation needs of you. It requires of you. This is just a hypothetical example. Could be other various things. Even with self-doubt, you need to start believing in yourself. You need to trust yourself. But before you get to that point, there's a lot of unlearning that you need to do. There's a lot of reaffirmations that you need to reinforce in your life. You need to really work on rewiring your mindset and your brain and how you see and view yourself and how you experience yourself. Because again, we are reflections of each other. So how you see yourself is how others experience you. Because that's what you project, right? And so, I think that's about it. Beautiful souls, I truly hope that today's video was very insightful for you, and just be kind to self as well. The process of becoming, the journey of transforming, like I said, it requires a lot. Be kind to self. Have grace for yourself. There's only one you. And remember, we are also mothering ourselves, or we are fathering ourselves. We are parenting ourselves. There's an inner child in us that is that constantly needs to be nurtured, and all of these things are unraveling and coming through adulthood, and through the processes of change. And listen, be kind to that younger version of yourself. And I trust that today's video is insightful for you. And with that said, beautiful soul, may goodness and grace lead you to greater heights of success. Namaste.